Ever wondered what you'd do if you ran over an alien on your commute to work? Because if you have, then I might have just the perfect book for you, which is Roadkill by Dennis E. Taylor. Based on the novel's title and my little intro, you've probably already guessed that Roadkill is exactly that. A story about a regular guy who just happens to run over an alien on his way to work. Which, all things considered, is a pretty relatable and believable premise around which to base a science fiction book. Given my previous experience with the author's work through the Bobiverse series, I somewhat expected Roadkill to also develop into that same genre of space adventure stories, but in the end what we actually got is more of a half-and-half mix between a political whodunit mystery and a problem management story. Which, while a bit of a surprise, is not necessarily a bad thing. In terms of structure, Roadkill is first and foremost a standalone novel, which makes this the perfect option for any of you out there who prefer to enjoy smaller, self-contained stories without the worry of needing to keep up with various sequels, prequels, or other spin-offs. Roadkill also more or less follows one of the typical science fiction formulas, opting for a single point-of-view character narration style presented through first-person past tense prose. Another really nice aspect of the novel's structure is that it's very compact in terms of its cast of characters, which maxes out at about 10 total named characters, with just under half of those being the novel's main protagonists. All of this makes the novel super easy to follow, which makes Roadkill a really nice option to wind down with after a hard days of work, or if you like me, you tend to do most of your reading by listening to audiobooks alongside doing chores or working out. Moving on to the subgenre composition, I'd describe Roadkill as primarily consisting of dramatic and action elements, with world building, comedy, suspense, and romance filling out the rest of the book's substance. If we first take a look at the book's dramatic elements, it's really no surprise that these are made up of the various interpersonal situations which arise between the book's characters, whether that be arguments between the protagonists, bonding moments between the protagonists, or confrontations between the protagonists and the villains of the story, and so on. All in all, I'd say all the character personalities are varied and unique enough to keep this part of the book interesting, which alongside the very natural execution of these inter-character interactions gives the book an overall very strong foundation to build upon. The action elements for the most part come into play in the form of numerous cat and mouse sequences between the book's protagonists and main bad guys, and these range in scale from your typical everyday car chases to starships slugging it out over the skies of North America, so there's plenty of excitement to be expected in your read-through. Then we've got the world building, and this is mostly there to set up the context of the various political sides involved in the story, as well as to explain some of the science fiction tropes in the book, but that's getting close to spoiler territory, so I'll leave that for another time. Comedy, while by no means a centerpiece of the novel, definitely plays an important part in the aforementioned dramatic elements of the book. This mostly consists of the nerdy sci-fi reference-filled banter between the protagonists. Alongside that, I also found a comedy character dynamic which really reminded me of a certain shiny beer can from the Expeditionary Force series, so fans of that series will definitely find themselves at home here. And vice versa, I suppose. In terms of the suspense elements, these mostly show up in connection to the whole political whodunit part of the novel, in which the protagonists try to figure out what kind of mess they found themselves in, how many interests there are at play, and who they can and can't trust. And lastly, we've got just a smidgen of romance elements, and I've gotta be honest that I kinda expected these elements to play a much larger part in the book's overall structure, given the repeated mentions of a romantic history between two of the book's main characters. But in the end, nothing really came of that. Was I a bit disappointed? Sure. But then again, I also feel that it would be kinda unfair to fault the book over such a subjective preference. So in conclusion, would I recommend you go out there and pick up a copy of Roadkill by Dennis E. Taylor? Yes, I think I would, especially if you're a fan of any of the author's previous works, or just a fan of science fiction stories in general. While I wouldn't exactly classify Roadkill as the end-all be-all science fiction book I've ever read, I do believe it has plenty of positive things going for it to warrant at least one read-through. Some of these I've already mentioned through the course of this review, but to summarize, I feel that the overall premise of the novel and its story are fun, the execution of the storytelling itself is immersive, and the characters, the problems they run into, and the solutions to those problems they come up with are interesting enough to keep you engaged for the entire length of the novel. In addition, the overall ratings for the novel from the usual sites I usually feature in these reviews are also quite positive, so I'll put those up on screen for you now. My only real gripe with the novel, aside from the whole romance thing, is that it's basically like a loaf of bread. The middle bits are great, while the bits on either end are less so. For the start of the novel, I felt that the characters were a bit too receptive to the situation they find themselves in. I mean, the main character literally runs over an alien, has about 5 seconds of panic at the most, after which he just calmly and methodically starts analyzing how best to utilize the situation to his own benefit. I feel that a bit more apprehensiveness and indecisiveness from the protagonists would have lent for a more immersive and believable start to the story. As for the end of the novel, that for me felt a bit underwhelming, as there's barely any follow through to the lives of the protagonists after their big adventure is over. They all just kinda go back to their lives as they were before the start of everything, so there's no real sense of tangible progress to their everyday lives. I feel if the author had expanded this part of the character building just a little bit, it would have lent for a far more impactful ending to the book overall. But maybe that's just me. If what you've heard thus far has piqued your interest, and you're looking to pick up a copy of Roadkill, you'll be glad to know that they're available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook formats, with the written versions coming in at a length of about 80,000 words, and the audiobook coming in at a length of about 9 hours. Pricing wise, the ebook version is the cheapest out of the bunch as usual, coming in at a price of just about $6 on Amazon, followed by both the paperback and audiobook versions at $15. And of course that's assuming you pick up the audiobook with an Audible credit. Of course, prices might have changed by the time you're watching this video, so I'll leave a handy Amazon link in the description down below so you can check for current pricing. Plus, it helps to support the channel if you do end up making a purchase through that link. But now I'll leave the ball in your court. Have any of you gotten a chance to read Roadkill yet? What did you think about it? Were my comments on the novel warranted? Or was I being too harsh on the book? Do let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to have a chat with all of you. Otherwise, thank you for watching and have a great day.